game and maybe want a few sneak peeks at an upcoming asymmetrical horror game centered on a unique ability system that I came up with.
So about that, I might have lied on accident. Anyways, if you already seen my shell video, welcome back. If you haven't, this is another video on how to play a killer in Game with Evil, an upcoming asymmetrical survival game that a couple of friends that I know are working on. I'm a tester and technically also a contributor, and I'd like to think that that counts as me being on the dev team, but my friend says otherwise. Since the last video, a lot of things have changed in Game with Evil. We have new maps, 2 new killers, side grades for abilities, and a lot more stuff planned. And also, I'm not sick anymore, so, hopefully my voice sounds a lot clearer than it did in the shell tutorial. As the title suggests, we'll be going over Template, the killer in Game with Evil that I designed. He has an interesting gimmick that allows him to change how he's played mid-round, making him one of the harder killers to reach the full potential of. Comparing him to Shell, he's a lot harder in terms of gameplay. The intro has been long enough, and I'm sure people are already clicking off by now, so let's get to learning Template. I bet you thought I was gonna get cut off this time, huh? Nope, I'm not that predictable. Template's entire kit revolves around the idea of stance switching or adapting to situations by changing Template's fighting style during rounds in order to maximize his overall potential. Template's R ability,
it's his T ability, you chud.
FX switch, will change his form, which I'll talk more about later, but you should keep in mind that this ability gives him 4 different modes that each do different things. If I could compare him to any existing characters, I would say he's like Coil from the game Fighting. He has to change his moveset and needs to change his moveset constantly in order to play him well. This video will be split into 3 parts. First, I'll talk about Template's abilities and how each ability functions. Then, I'll have a section dedicated to Template's Q and E abilities, as they both happen to be Template's most complex abilities. Finally, I'll talk about Template's kit and what you can do in order to play him as strongly as possible. Template has 4 abilities. Kind of? Like I said earlier, Template is a lot more complex than the other killers, and he's definitely one of the harder killers to play in Game with Evil. You could make an argument that Zyra's harder, but I think that's just because she's underpowered as of right now, so whatever. Template's first ability is obviously his M1, which is Punch, a weak
20 damage hit, not 19.
That has a 0.3 second wind up and a 2.5 second cooldown. If you can't already tell by the stats, his M1 is pretty lackluster compared to other killers. It can be used for damage when other abilities are in cooldown, but Punch was made kind of underpowered to try to encourage Template's stance switching as an essential part of his kit. Well, as of writing the script, it was underpowered, but then it got buffed up to 20 damage, and we're not going to talk about that. Template's second ability is Vertical Collapse, and trust me, it's as cool as it sounds. Template slows down heavily, grabbing at whatever's in front of him. If he can grab a player, he holds them in the air and then slams them into the ground, doing something different depending on whatever mode Template is on. More on this later, but to summarize, default mode will do a lot of damage, flame mode will do a little damage and inflict burning and give you strength, particle mode will do decent damage and give you adrenaline, and then sparkle mode will do some good damage and inflict vulnerability and highlight to whoever you hit. If that was a little confusing, don't worry, it should be. That's why I have a section later on in the video talking about this ability and the next ability, which would be Template's third ability, Toolbox. Toolbox is Template's range projectile ability, which functions similarly to Vertical Collapse in the sense that it changes depending on what mode Template is currently on. Upon casting Toolbox, Template reaches into a gift box and throws out the following objects. Default mode throws a wooden crate that has physics and does damage. Flame mode launches a slow, large AoE fireball with little damage and a lot of burn. Particle mode throws a no-clip battery that pierces through players and gives Template adrenaline. And Sparkle mode has Template place a subspace strip mine in front of him, which acts as area denial rather than a projectile. Again, if that was confusing, there's a section that goes in depth about the exact numbers and facts about Toolbox later, so be patient and just take everything at face value for now. Using that ring around his head, Template changes what mode he has currently enabled, with a 1-second cooldown which allows for constant combos and changes in his playstyle. Every time you use FX Switch, Template's mode cycles through 4 different modes, in the order of Base, Flame, Particle, and then Sparkle. If you use FX Switch again with Sparkle mode on, it just cycles back to Base. So understanding and utilizing the order of Template's modes is important to making sure you combo your abilities correctly. This is especially important because you can't change the direction in which your mode changes. If you're on Flame mode, you can only go to Particle, and Particle can only go to Sparkle. The modes that Template has will do different things, so to dumb it down, Base Ring will do a solid amount of damage, Flame Ring will do a little damage but apply burn, Particle Ring will do some damage but gives Template adrenaline, and Sparkle Ring will do decent damage and apply vulnerability. Each mode will affect Vertical Collapse and Toolbox differently, so don't think that this is all that the modes do. With the basics of Template's abilities out of the way, it's time to tackle Vertical Collapse and Toolbox and see what they have to offer.
Vertical Collapse is Template's strongest and most damaging ability, used for punishing anyone unfortunate enough to miss a stun or hit 0 stamina in the chase. Using it will inflict damage on the target and either reward you with an effect or punish the target with an effect. Or maybe it'll just do more damage, sure. Vertical Collapse also ragdolls whoever you hit, which keeps them in place long enough for your end lag to catch up, essentially restarting a chase by keeping distance while allowing you to regain stamina. Here's the specific stats for every Vertical Collapse variant. Base Collapse does a flat 30 damage with no secondary effects. Flame Collapse does a weak 8 damage but applies Burning 1 for 5 seconds, meaning 20 total damage, and rewards Template with Strength 1 for 30 seconds. Particle Collapse does a low 14 damage but rewards Template with Adrenaline 1 for 14 seconds, and finally, Sparkle Collapse does a decent 20 damage, applies Vulnerability 2 for 30 seconds, and highlights the target for 10 seconds. Universally, all Vertical Collapse modes will have a 0.45 second wind up, 25 second cooldown, and inflict Ragdoll for 1.5 seconds. It also slows you down upon using it.
Calling all the basic bits. Calling all the basic bits.
Base Collapse is obviously the best mode for quick burst damage and enables you to do enough damage to finish off targets that have higher than 19 health but lower than 31 health, which sounds like a small range but is actually much more common than you would expect. Depending on the situation, Base Collapse might be the better option for punishing survivors with any amount of health, but using other Vertical Collapse modes is usually smarter due to their rewarding utilities if the survivor isn't in execution range. Flame Collapse could probably be considered as the mode with the most utility, with damage so low that you'd be extremely lucky to get a direct kill using it. To make up for this, Flame Collapse applies Burn that does an additional 12 damage over time and gives Template Strength 1, which means his M1 does a respectable amount of damage at 22.8. However, it should be noted that the buff from Flame Collapse boosts Template's damage by 20%, while the vulnerability from Sparkle Collapse boosts Template's damage by 40%. When using Flame and Sparkle, you should consider whether or not you want higher damage on one target or higher damage spread across multiple targets. Particle Collapse does enough damage to kill a target but usually only serves one purpose, enabling Template to hit targets with his M1 mid-chase. The Vertical Collapse ragdoll time paired with the lower stamina loss from Adrenaline means Template will have much more stamina than the survivor at any given moment. While this doesn't benefit Template's Toolbox ability much, this lets Template hit all of his M1s so long as he's close enough to the survivor, which is going to be most of the time assuming you weren't at 0 stamina upon using Particle Collapse. Additionally, you can use Particle Collapse on nearby Sentinel drones in order to get the Adrenaline buff to chase after your original target without needing to risk missing and placing Vertical Collapse on cooldown. To summarize, particle collapse is amazing if you need to catch up to a survivor in chase.
Sparkle Collapse is Template's premier targeting ability. If you hit a survivor with Sparkle Collapse, they take 20 damage, which isn't much, but is incredibly rewarding because it applies that same survivor with vulnerability too, which helps you do even more damage to them specifically. If you want to focus on a single target, use Sparkle Collapse. It's that simple. Additionally, like I said earlier, the vulnerability from Sparkle boosts Template's damage much more than the strength from Flame, so keep that in mind.
On the opposite side of the keyboard is Toolbox, Template's projectile ability, which has much more utility and variation than Vertical Collapse. Each projectile has its different uses, so keeping track of what mode you're on when using Toolbox is important in order to enable the highest likelihood for your projectile to hit the target. The stats for each Toolbox variant are as follows. Base Toolbox launches a wooden crate that has physics, doing a solid 10 damage upon hitting a survivor. The projectile can bounce and hit multiple survivors. It also applies Phase 2 for 9 seconds. Flame Toolbox fires a huge and slow fireball, which, upon hitting an object or survivor, spawns an AoE hitbox that deals 2 initial damage and then applies Burning 1 for 5 seconds, inflicting a total of 15 damage. Particle Toolbox throws a fast, small battery that goes through walls and pierces through players. If a battery hits a survivor, they take 6 damage and Template gets Adrenaline 1 for 14 seconds, the same duration as Particle Collapse. The battery also doesn't have bullet drop. Sparkle Toolbox plants a trip mine rather than throwing a projectile, which is a good area denial tool that, when a survivor is close enough, detonates with an AoE hitbox that does 15 damage, knocks survivors back, and inflicts Phase 1 for 15 seconds, Vulnerability 2 for 25 seconds, and Ragdolled for 2.5 seconds. The Trip Mine has a 55-second lifespan. All Toolbox variants have a 0.65 second windup and a 23-second cooldown. It also slows you down upon using it. Base Toolbox is the closest to a standard projectile ability in Template's moveset, and there isn't really much to talk about. If you and a survivor are in a chase and you enter a corridor or a straight line where the survivor can't dodge, you should use Base Toolbox to confirm a free 10 damage on the survivor. It's a good mid-range tool that isn't practical in close range and isn't as effective in longer ranges. Flame Toolbox is interesting, and I think that mainly stems from it doing 15 damage, which is more than the Base Toolbox. Before the patches, Base Toolbox used to just do a flat 20 damage, but now Flame Toolbox does more damage at 15 because Base Toolbox got nerfed. Despite this, I think its use is pretty similar to what it used to be, being a damage confirmer that allows you to hit survivors in close range without needing to aim around objects or risking hitting a block. This also works for crowds standing nearby, which you can hit with a fireball in order to deal damage to multiple targets, utilizing the large AoE. In small loops, Flame Toolbox's large hitbox also allows you to hit the survivor through the loop and do some free damage, and in rare cases, will actually kill the survivor, ending the chase easily. I personally think the main benefit of Flame Toolbox is the large AoE hitbox, which makes it easier to hit people, but because of how slow Flame Toolbox is and how slow the fireball moves, you shouldn't try to use it at longer distances, because that makes it easier for survivors to move out of the way. Particle Toolbox is Particle Collapse if you can't be bothered to use Vertical Collapse. That's literally it. Everything is nearly the same, with the damage only being 8 less, which sounds like more than it actually is, and the adrenaline lasting the same amount of time. Because of the piercing and lack of bullet drop, you can hit survivors in tight and narrow areas, and if you're lucky, you can hit multiple, which to my knowledge does not stack the adrenaline, but it'll still give you good damage.
Meme to me earlier? Teleport everyone to me. There we go. That's a lot of strollers. Wow, jeez.
Sparkle Toolbox is the only ability that Template has for area denial, but it does a damn good job at it. The explosion radius isn't large enough to block off every area in every map, but it still covers most loops with ease, and while it can be baited with enough precision, that usually won't happen mid-chase when a survivor risks taking damage by trying to bait a trip mine while you're approaching. The 3 ragdoll time invulnerability allows you to get some free hits on a survivor, and, if it's off cooldown, vertical collapse combos amazingly well with the trip mine's effects. Base collapse can do upwards of 42 damage when slamming an affected survivor, so if you know what you're doing, Sparkle Toolbox can be one of the template's best abilities. It blocks off potential loops, choke points, or even exits to rooms that confirm a kill on a survivor. Template's abilities and the way his modes act so differently from one another leaves room for a lot of different combinations, and his kit encourages these combinations due to Template's underpowered M1. Understanding the situations in which you want to use each mode is vital to getting wins with Template, since it's very easy to misuse each of Template's modes. One thing I would suggest is stacking Flame Collapse with the Trip Mine, since you'll be doing a lot of damage with your M1s to whoever was hit by the Trip Mine. Template's M1 goes from one of the worst to one of the best in the span of a few seconds, and has the potential to 3-hit any survivor, given they're inflicted with vulnerability of course. The Trip Mine in general has a lot of synergies, even in modes like Double Treble, because of its punishing area denial, which allows killers to hit strong punishing moves on a still target that also has vulnerability. You should also always try to hide your trip mine in an area where survivors can get hit without seeing it, or place your trip mine in a tight area that makes it unavoidable. It really isn't hard to place your trip mine in a good spot, and if you can do it right, it can become a dangerous wall that easily allows you to pick up kills. Place it behind walls, under objects, in small areas like bridges or hallways, and you're done.
If it wasn't obvious, any vertical collapse mode will work beautifully with trip mines, and it's an incredibly easy ability to pair with anything, but don't overuse them. Other projectiles like the battery are still strong if you can utilize them correctly in chases.
Additionally, Block can actually disable the trip mines by blocking as they enter the trip mine's radius, which will fling them and apply the same effects but won't do any damage to the survivor. By doing this, you also get slowed and have helpless applied, something that could ruin your entire chase. The same goes for TV, so be careful about using your trip mines all the time. Block can actually block all projectiles from the template, but I think the trip mine is the most important projectile that can be blocked.
Here's some tech people don't really know about Template. Using Flame Collapse more than once before the Strength 1 wears out will stack the effects, becoming Strength 2, 3, and so on. While the Strength lasts 30 seconds, the Vertical Collapse cooldown is 25 seconds, giving you a 5-second time window to get increasingly stronger damage. Strength will boost your damage by 20% per stack, so don't underestimate the capability of stacking Flame Collapse. Finally, the tips and tricks are out of the way, so I'll end the video with some template gameplay just so you can see what a good template round looks like. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.
Wait.
So while writing the script, I did not include a tier list section, so I'm just adding that in at the last section of the video before the gameplay starts. Off the top of my head, no script, we're just going right into it. So Shale first, who goes in S tier. I think the top of S tier, he's really strong. While being simple, he is still very versatile, and I think my placement in the last video about Shale for the tier list was definitely incorrect. Corvex next goes in probably A tier, like the bottom of A tier. No, top of B tier I think is suitable. I think that Corvex is alright, but compared to the top 3 killers, he isn't that good. Next we have Zyra, bottom of B tier, worst killer right now. Might get some buffs in the future, which I think would definitely help, but right now Zyra is very underpowered, does not have much damage output, and when facing a larger team of survivors, Zyra definitely struggles and cannot keep up with the amount of healing done to her chip damage. Template, next to Shale, top of S tier, very strong, very versatile. Only problem is that the trip mines can be blocked, which I think keeps him from being #1 in the killers tier list, but he can still adapt to basically any map, and I think that's really strong. Also, his projectiles are all really good. Finally, we have Fallen. I think A tier works well. Recently got a buff that makes it so that she's really strong, but I haven't really played the rework. She could be better than Template, so maybe maybe, no. Maybe they're switched around, I don't know. But right now I'm just gonna say that she's an A tier, and this is the final killers tier list. Maybe things change in the future, probably will, because, you know, everything's subject to change, but right now I think this is how it's looking for the killers tier list. That's all, goodbye.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.